Hello and welcome to Don't Tell Me to Relax, the fertility podcast here to guide you through the roller coaster of trying to conceive. I'm Hannah, your host, a fertility acupuncturist with clinics in London and across the UK. Our patients tell us how frustrated they feel about their lack of fertility education. So this podcast aims to provide all that education they never taught you in school, with the aim of putting you back in control of your fertility journey. We also have our fertility community to help address isolation and provide further information and support. To join us, the link is in the show notes. Hello and welcome back. This is actually going to be the last episode of the series for 2024 because we're going to take a bit of a break over Christmas and have some time really to prep. We've already started the prep for next year and we've already got some great episodes booked in, but it's good for us to have a bit of a break and think about what people want for the next series. So we're not going to be doing a podcast in December. We're going to be finishing here. And I just want to say that this series has really been a huge emphasis on fertility education because we're just, Katie and I really believe that we cannot talk about this stuff enough. And we know that these episodes around fertility education are always so popular. So if while we're off, you want more information, obviously you can go back and listen to all the episodes. But we've also got all the live webinars that were part of the Teaching to Conceive series that we did alongside this series that we did in our community that are all available to watch back. So we've got myself talking about menstrual cycle health, Katie talking about cycle tracking. We've got Kirsty talking about nutrition, Morven talking about tests. And we've got Carly as well talking about mental health. So there's loads of really, really good resources there to keep you going while we're off. So the link to get access to that is at the end of the show. So Katie, it is really difficult to believe that we are at the end of the year. I know we've still got December to come, but as soon as December hits, I feel like that's it, game over. We're sort of done for the year. And I don't know about you, but what are your reflections on this year and what's been going on?
It's been a big year.
Yeah, it really has.
It's been a big year. I mean, I guess for me, like I opened my own treatment room, so that was like a big thing, and that was a hectic start to the year because I opened a treatment room and moved house in the same week. That was fun. And yeah, then just like watching the clinic grow and having like Bella doing acupuncture here as well, and now there's like 2 other reflexologists working here. We've got Marta and Virna. And yeah, it's just kind of all taken off, which has been really lovely to see, and like being able to help more and more people and doing like the online conceive course and things as well. Had our first conceived baby. So
really?
Yeah.
Oh, that's amazing. That is amazing.
So someone was in the first group last year and then had a baby. She's Connie, friend of the show.
Yeah.
I was there when she went into labour. So, yeah, so that was really nice. So yeah, it's been really lovely. Yeah. How about you? What are your reflections?
Well, it's funny, isn't it? Because I'm always so thinking about the next thing. I'm always moving on to the next thing. As you know, Katie, we've just been talking about it. And there is a part of my brain that just will not shut up. But and it's hard to remember that this year, well, at the start of the year, we were up for the Glow Mama Awards.
Oh
Can you
my
believe
God.
that was at the beginning of the year? So that is...
Because I moved house that day and then we went to the awards.
Yeah. So that is, that is hard to believe that we, that was the start of the year. I guess we've opened in your clinic and we've opened in Belgravia. And we've also taken on all the affiliates, so people who are across the UK who are working as part of the team. So fertility acupuncturists, Hannah Perm, fertility acupuncturist across the UK. I mean, can't quite believe it. And here I am thinking, what are we going to do next year? Is that enough? What are we going to do with the podcast? So, it's important, isn't it, always to remember your achievements rather than just, move on to the next thing. Anyway. This episode, we are just going to be reflecting on, I guess, the year. And I guess what we're going to be talking about is common mistakes or common problems that we see in people who, in our community when they ask questions, in clinic, people who message us on Instagrams. And these are things that I think areas where it's easy to make mistakes. And I say this with kindness because it's not because anyone's doing anything wrong. It's just because we haven't had the education or the information to make informed decision. So we're just going to pick like 4 of the main areas where we see common mistakes that can really inhibit your success when you're trying to conceive. And we're just going to kind of have a little chat about those and end the show on that note, and in the hope that there is something in there that's helpful rather than judgmental. So Katie, I'm going to go to you first. I said I was going to go to you second, but I've talked too much, so I'm going to go to you first. So one of the common areas where we see problems is around relying on our apps to track your cycle. And so apps to track your cycle and apps to tell you when you're ovulating. So can you tell us the dangers of this, Katie?
So, I mean, well, apps can be a really good place to start, I think. And it's where a lot of people start when they're trying to work out just when their period's going to come. And that they're helpful to some degree if you have a regular cycle to know when your next period will be. However, if you're using an app in terms of trying to track ovulation to try and conceive, if the only bit of information you're putting in is when your period starts, it is just not enough information for it to accurately tell you when you're ovulating, particularly if your cycle isn't what we're told is a typical cycle of being like 28 days long and ovulating on day 14, because the vast majority of people, that is not what their cycle looks like. So the thing with the vast majority of apps is you put in your period and say you've got like 6, 12 cycles, you've been tracking it for a while in there. Ultimately, what it's doing is creating an average of your average cycle length and then counting back 14 days. And that's when it's going to tell you that you're ovulating based on an average. So if you're not paying attention to what your body is telling you, honestly, the amount of times that once people get the understanding of things like cervical mucus, BBT, just getting to know their cycle more intimately, so many people realize they're actually missing their fertile window completely, or just not timing sex quite at the right time, not enough sex. We're going to talk about that as well. But it's looking at cervical mucus, I'd say particularly, is really important to know when you're in that run up to the fertile window. And your app is unlikely to be able to tell you that, particularly if the only bit of information you're putting in is when your period starts. So that's why we are always talking about cervical mucus, because it's probably, I would love to know how many times across the podcast we have said cervical mucus.
Maybe there's like some AI tool that we could go and look into it.
I'd give away a free treatment if someone worked that out. I bet it's a lot. Do like a sweepstake on how many times. Anyway, so we're always talking about cervical mucus because it is like giving you the kind of crystal ball into the future to be like, ovulation's on the way. If you're having sex when you're seeing mucus, you're in that fertile window. But yeah, relying on an app is just, it could let you down and leave you disappointed, I would say.
Yes, and I think it's a very, very common, very, very easy mistake to make, because everybody is sold apps like, you know, it's going to tell you, it says this is when you're ovulating.
Yeah.
So why would you not believe it? So
Totally.
you know, it's really easy to understand why that has happened.
Well,
but it's that lack of education, isn't
100%. And I wasn't tracking my cycle to conceive, but I was using an app, had a 27-day cycle. App would say ovulating on day 14. And I was like, but why do I always feel a certain way on like day 18 or something, like 10 days before my period would start? And actually, once I started to track my cycle, it's like, oh, I'm ovulating later into my cycle than what my app was telling me. The other big things that we see is about male fertility and that not being looked at as early as we would perhaps like. So do you want to dive into that, Hannah?
Yes, I would love to dive into that. And in fact, actually, I've just remembered, as this year we did Men in May.
Yeah.
So we did a whole series, which if you've not heard it and you want to find out more about male fertility, every episode we did in May was about male fertility with lots of different guests on talking about it. So that will be a helpful pointer if you're looking for more information. But yeah, the thing about male fertility fertility is that it is still very common to assume that when a female isn't getting pregnant, that the issue is going to be with her and not with the partner. And, you know, We see it time and time and time again in clinic. It still happens. We still see it in our community. People put up questions saying things like, why have I been investigated and my partner has not had a single test? Or why am I having investigations for recurrent miscarriage and nobody's investigated the sperm? These are, not abstract one-off occurrences. These are really, really common. Or somebody's done a semen analysis and they're told it's okay. It's okay. It's not great, but it's okay. And it shouldn't be anything to worry about. So, it's a really important area to flag. And it's important to flag that a semen analysis is not enough to diagnose healthy and fertile man. You often need to be looking further into it, especially if you've been trying to conceive for over 6 months, especially if you've got unexplained infertility, especially if you have had miscarriage. Then taking one semen analysis alone as evidence that everything is okay is not enough. You need to investigate it further. And we've got lots of episodes with pointers of where to go to get these investigations done, because unfortunately, they are not available on the NHS. And unfortunately, the sort of general route for male fertility issues, or if there's deemed to be issues, is going through IVF and using IVF and ICSI as a tool to circumnavigate that, which in some cases would be absolutely fine. I'm not saying it's not, but it's definitely not the solution for everybody. So it's important to get the right tests and investigations, see an andrologist if there are further issues that need to be addressed before you then continue to try again naturally, or before you embark on IVF. And the other thing I'm going to flag, just because we've just been talking about it in our team meeting this morning, about secondary infertility. So if you are suffering from secondary infertility, again, it's often assumed, okay, you've had a baby, therefore the male must be fine because you've had a baby in the past. But actually, there is a very high proportion of secondary infertility cases that is actually male factor. So again, I don't think that is often flagged or picked up, or it's a common kind of thing that is overlooked about that idea of investigating that properly. So it's a really, really important area, and definitely needs more support, investigations, right treatments. And I understand and empathise that it's difficult when there is not a lot available on the NHS and you feel like you come up against a brick wall. But there are options privately, and some of them aren't ridiculously expensive. And as we always say, they're cheaper than a round of IVF if you're paying for it privately. So, and I say that I know it's not cheap, but it's definitely cheaper in the long run than a very expensive IVF treatment. So that was mine, Katie. The next one we're going to look at is ovulation predictor kits and sex, and the amount of sex to have when you're trying to conceive.
Ovulation predictor kits, they are, personally, I'm not the biggest fan of them. Partly because they're not always super reliable. I think people can find them stressful and confusing, and they often what can happen is people are waiting to see a positive on an ovulation predictor kit, where you seeing that LH surge and the test says like, yes, cool, like had the LH surge, you're likely to ovulate in the next 24 to 36 hours or so. That's what the kind of typical time frame is. And people are missing the days of mucus in the lead up to that LH surge. So you could be missing loads of opportunities to have sex. And there is some research that has been done that has suggested that people who are purely reliant on OPKs are having less sex than those who are not using them. So ultimate mucus is, as far as I'm concerned, always a good idea. But if you're going to use ovulation predictor kits, like use them with your first morning wee, so it's getting the most kind of concentrated type of form of urine, so then it's more likely to be able to pick up the LH. And personally, I would say just test it once a day. Like, I wouldn't be trying to test it multiple times a day. I've definitely heard of that before, and you just don't need to. It's more stress, going to cost you more. Like, some of these strips, again, like not the cheapest of things. If you're using multiple ones a day, then it can just become expensive and stressful. So I would say if you are going to use them, just once a day, but make sure you're looking at your mucus, so you're not kind of just waiting for that positive and on OPK. Because the other thing is sometimes like I said, they're not always the most reliable. So if you're purely waiting on that and then you don't see a positive, or you just miss the surge, then you could have missed a whole cycle of trying. So just making sure, like the kind of general advice I would say is sex every other day from when your period stops until you confirm ovulation is kind of a good time frame for most people.
Yeah. And you know what? It's just reminding me talking about that and where we are doing this podcast is that on average, you've probably got 10, 11, 12 opportunities a year to conceive. You know, it's not many, is
No,
it? If
not
you think about
really.
it. And that's if you ovulate every single month. We're assuming there when, you know, we're assuming there that people ovulate every month. And we know that probably you might miss one a year as just sort of part of biology. And if you've got any ovulatory disorders, then it might be fewer times. And so if you think like, let's say 10, 11 opportunities, I'm not saying this to scare anybody, but I'm just saying there's not a huge number of opportunities to conceive each year.
Yeah.
So if you're missing it because you're not getting a surge and you're not having sex at that time, then it's a real doubt. It's a real disadvantage, isn't it? So
Yeah.
ovulation predictor kits have a place, but definitely using them on their own is easy to miss your window, I would say.
Yeah, I'd agree with that as well. Because the surge, I mean, I can't think off the top of my head how long the surge itself actually lasts, but like you could miss it.
Yeah, it's not long. It's like 12 to 24.
Yeah.
And it's a window, and it's very different for people because it's a hormone that's released, and it can be released in lots of different ways at lots of different times. So, and given it's such a short burst of that LH that you get, it's not surprising that people miss it.
Yeah.
And if you're not using strips that are like, you know, highly sensitive, like the cheap Amazon ones, number of people in clinic who are like, I just don't get anything with the cheap Amazon ones, but they do with like the more like expensive clear blue. But it's just that if you miss it and then you're confused and you don't know whether you've had enough sex at the right time, it's like it's such a stressful thing.
Yeah, I've definitely had, like, I guess another kind of common mistake as such is people being like, well, I'm using the strips and I'm not seeing anything, so I guess I'm not ovulating. And it's like, that's like not necessarily true. So again, tracking your cycle in a bit more depth and kind of being less reliant on tech and apps and things and like just knowing what your body's showing you. I've definitely seen that give people a lot of reassurance of like, oh, actually, I think maybe things are better than what perhaps I'd first thought.
Yeah. And actually, that's the other area that we're going to talk about in terms of common mistakes is around not understanding your cycle. So again, you know, I say this with complete kindness because unless you've been taught to know what a healthy menstrual cycle looks like, how do you know? You know how there's so many people who've come into clinic unaware that a short luteal phase A is happening, and B that it could be an issue for trying to conceive, or that ovulating too soon could be a problem with the maturity of the egg, or ovulating too late could be a sign of, you know, polycystic ovaries. All of these things, if you've not been given the education, how do you know? So I would say, you know, understanding your cycle of how long to take to ovulate is normal, when you ovulate, what ovulation should look like, what a good luteal phase should be, and understanding how many days it is and being confident in tracking it. All of that information can really just give you the confidence that your cycle is fertile, because I've worked with people in clinic who assume that they've been trying to conceive for a year. And when we go back through their cycle and we look at them month on month, we found that the first 6 months was actually when they came off contraception and their cycles weren't fertile because they were irregular, they were short, their luteal phase wasn't very long, they were having spotting because their cycles hadn't fully re-established. And in those people's minds, they were like, I've been trying for a year and nothing's happening. And actually, it was only 6 months that they'd been trying, or 5 months, because of the cycle issues. And they had no awareness of that. So I think, you know, really getting clear and understanding your cycle is one of the best things that you can do.
Do you want a bit of a run?
So, Katie, can you tell us, just because it's really always good to recap it, can you tell us, roughly what a good cycle looks like so everyone's got that clear in their mind so we know we're ticking that box?
So, yeah, you want to fit into various different parameters. So, for instance, your bleed, so your period should have a nice clear start and end, ideally about 3 to 7 days of bleeding. And that blood, you want it to be like a nice kind of good red colour. So it could be like a bright red, a darker red, but ultimately red. You don't want it to be brown, black, like any funky colours. If it's very pale, that could kind of suggest like anemia or things. So there's different things going on in terms of the colour. Your follicular phase, so that's from when your period starts until ovulation, ideally about like 11 to 21 days. Is that right? Yes, 11 to 21 days. So then you'll be ovulating on days sort of like 11 to 21. The luteal phase, ideally 12 to 14 days in length, like 11's kind of borderline, but ideally you want it on that kind of longer end of the spectrum. It can be 15 days, but typically I think I've never seen longer than a 15-day luteal phase, like naturally. Maybe if someone was using progesterone, but other than that, that's kind of what you would expect. The whole length of your cycle from one period to the next, sort of 24 to 35 days, and like minimal PMS, minimal pain. Like if you spot a day before your period starts, that's not uncommon, but you don't want prolonged spotting before your period starts. And you also don't want like a really long end to the period and it like kind of continuing for days and days and days on end. So I think they're the kind of like main things. So if your cycle is outside of those parameters, like looking at all the different areas, then that's when it might be helpful to like work with someone like us and get some help to kind of decode what's going on.
Yeah. And in terms of lifestyle, what are like the big hitters that we need to think about?
I mean, I definitely see stress being a big one. So managing your stress levels, getting enough sleep, like it's so simple, but I think too many of us are like running on fumes half the time. So getting good quality, plenty of sleep. Nutrition is another really big one. Like go back and look at Kirsty's podcast episodes and in the Facebook group. I couldn't remember what it was called then. Sleep, nutrition, stress. I always end up missing them. It's like
Exercise.
Exercise is another really important one. Not too much, not too little. Again, early on you did an episode about exercise, didn't you?
Yeah.
With Holly.
And actually it's one of the most popular episodes.
Yeah, it's a really good one. So Holly from the Bump Plan can talk you through everything about exercising when trying to conceive, because it is really good for your overall health, like reproductive health. But on the flip side of that, if you're doing too much of it, then it can have negative impacts. So just kind of assessing how much and what you're doing there as well.
Yeah. And I guess, just to kind of sort of wrap everything up and sort of tie all this together is that, this episode is around common mistakes made when you're trying to conceive. What I will also say, and I think it's really important to acknowledge, is that you can do all of the things. You can do all of the things perfectly. Track your cycle, have your acupuncture, take your supplements, eat your high protein breakfast, don't have your coffee till all these things that we talk about, and you still don't get pregnant. And somebody put up that in our community this week or last week, and it really struck me because it's so true that a lot of fertility is unexplained. Like a lot of reasons why it doesn't always happen. We just cannot explain it. And I always say to people in clinic that fertility is really unfair and really unkind in that, in lots of other areas of your life, you can work hard at something. If you want to get the job or you want to buy the house, all of these things, you can work really, really hard and do your best. And you hope that leads to your end goal. But in fertility, it really doesn't happen that way. And I wish there was something, and I don't know, I wish there was something that I could say that could make that easier to hear or live with, but there isn't. It's just really, really cruel and it's really unfair. And I guess the only thing I can say is that when you do all the things, you've done everything that you possibly can. And that's it. That's actually it. You've controlled all the things that are controllable. And there is a huge part of this that science doesn't understand. IVF doctors don't understand. The best clinics in the world don't get 100% rates for all of their amazing medical intervention. So, I just want to say I'm really sorry if you're doing all the things and it's still not working, because it's really shit.
Yeah.
I don't know whether you've got anything to say about as well to add to that, Katie.
I think, just I think it is really shit, and knowing that it's shit and being okay to kind of sit in that shit for a while and not just ignore it and things. It's that thing of don't stuff down the emotions around it. And I know it's really hard, and that's very easy for me to say, but like you say, there's so many things in life where it's you put the work in and then you know what the result's going to be, and then this just isn't one of those circumstances. And I think like you say, feeling like you've done everything that was in your control, I think is probably definitely what I feel most clients kind of are then reassured by, and they're like, well, do you know what, we have done everything that we possibly could. And I think just getting yourself informed and finding spaces to not feel alone in it as well. I know that's one of the other tricky things is it's really, really challenging. And so many couples, and I understand the reasons why, but so many couples are it will be just them and their partner that know they're trying to conceive. So it can feel really, really lonely as well. So I think getting support in whatever capacity you need that whilst you're trying to conceive, whether that's from friends, family, practitioners, doctors, therapists, then there's help out there if you're finding it hard.
Yeah. And that's why we have our community, isn't it? Because it's a place, it's not, we don't charge for people to be in there. We try our best to answer questions, and it's a place where you can, put up how you're feeling, and there's going to be somebody in there who understands. They won't be the same as you, obviously, but there'll be somebody else, because whenever someone puts up a question or this is what's happening to me today, somebody always responds with, I understand, because this is what's happening to me. And, just having that kind of acknowledgement that you're not alone, even though you probably do feel alone, can be a little bit helpful at that point in time. And I was just going to say as well that obviously this is coming out at the end of November. We are moving into the Christmas silly season.
Yes.
And I think last year we did do an episode all about navigating Christmas, and we've definitely got a webinar about navigating Christmas. And what I would say is that if you are going through the festive period and you decide that you're going to have a glass of fizz, or you're going to have not the turkey, because that's actually quite healthy, but let's say the mince pies or whatever it is, there is a lot of guilt and fear and shame around food and drink and all of the celebrations around Christmas. And I'm not saying completely pack it all in, all the wonderful things that you've been doing, but allowing yourself to take the reins off is completely okay. And having the mince pies or the glass of champagne, whatever it is not going to be the reason you go into January not conceiving. I think Kirsty talked about it last year as an 80-20 thing. Of 80% of the time you're doing all the good stuff, and 20% of the time it's not bad stuff, but you're doing the stuff that's kind of kicking back a bit. It's not going to have a long-term impact on your future for fertility for 2025. So if it's helpful, I will also link that episode and the webinar we've done, because it might be good to just kind of listen to someone who's an expert talk through that, so you're not kind of worrying about that on top of the fact that sometimes it can be difficult facing family, getting the questions, all of those things as well. We know that it can be difficult at Christmas. So hopefully some of that will be helpful in there. So Katie, tell us, 2025. God, it makes me feel old saying 2025. 2025. What's the plan? Any plans?
Now you've said that, I'm like, I've not really got much of a plan. Probably should sit down and think about that. We'll be doing the Conceive course again early next year. But other than that, definitely hibernating for a little while.
Yeah.
And just training up the team, really, getting everyone feeling really confident.
Good. Sounds like a good plan.
Yeah, how about you?
Good plan. I don't know what I'm going to be doing next year. I literally have 1,000,001 ideas buzzing around my brain.
Imagine.
Yeah. So I don't know. I'm gonna take some time off over Christmas. Why we're having a break in December, because I'm just gonna take a little bit of time to think about what happens next year. But I'm always excited for it, and I'm always looking forward to doing more work in this field and hopefully getting more excellent podcast episodes out. And who knows, Katie? Who knows? Next year we might be award winners.
I mean,
let's just put it out to the universe.
Let's just put it out there. Award-winning podcast.
Not award nominated, award winning. Imagine.
We'll get there.
We will. I believe it. Well, as always, thank you very much, and I really look forward to more of the same next year. We hope you have found this episode helpful. If you'd like to leave us a review, we would love you to bits. And if you'd like more support for your fertility, you can come and work with us in clinic. We're based in London and around the UK, or you can work with us online. For more information, see the link at the end of the show.